Hello everyone, this is our first lesson in our Holocaust unit where we're going to be looking at the events that led to the Holocaust taking place between 1939 and 1945. I'd just like to draw your attention to the screenshot you see in front of you here from the website called facinghistory.org. They're an organization, they have offices all around the world, and they've been coming into Crestix for the last few years to help us create projects about the Holocaust that took place during World War II. Over the next 5 weeks, you're going to be creating a project, something very unique, something that you're very proud of, and you'll be having an opportunity to get a little bit more information about that at the end of our lesson today. When we look at why the Holocaust happened, we need to actually travel back to the 1880s in Germany to look at the root of the problem. Uh, in the 1880s, Germany was an industrial powerhouse in Europe. They had very large factory industry. They were very talented at making chemicals and plastics and things like that. And after 1914, when World War One began, Germany slowly started to decline in their own population. They weren't having as many babies as people were dying. Now, in 1918, Germany surrenders and loses the First World War, and in 1919, the Treaty of Versailles is signed. Now, this had very steep economic sanctions on Germany, and loads of people in the country lost their jobs, and in doing so, they lost their ability to pay their rent and buy their food. Now, this led to some problems in Germany where the government wasn't exactly doing everything in their power to solve the economic problem. And it led to a series of uprisings that took place between 1919 and 1923. There's a few that we look at. We look at the Spartacist uprising, the Cap Push, and this image here is of Adolf Hitler right here and his friends who tried to take over the government in November of 1923 in an event known as the Munich Push. Now, between 1923 and 1930, the Nazis are gaining popularity. And in 1929, they're going to use the Great Depression to their advantage. In the Great Depression, roughly 6 million Germans became unemployed. And again, the government could not seem to fix the problem. However, the Nazis were providing people with work, with financial relief, and with places to live. And this led a lot of Germans to willingly vote for Hitler. Now, in 1933, he's going to take power as the Chancellor of Germany, and by 1934, he's going to have complete rule within the country. In 1935, concentration camps opened, and in 1941, the final solution, which was the first systematic method of extermination that would be used to try to get rid of Jewish people from Europe. So again, these are the big ones that we're going to be focusing on our lesson today. What was the Holocaust? Because not everyone knows what Holocaust actually means, and it translates into English roughly into the words Great Destruction. Now, the Holocaust was the murder of roughly 6 million Jews living in Europe. We say roughly because historians don't know exactly how many people were murdered. There's a few reasons for this. Not everyone had a birth certificate. Some people lived in very rural villages, and the amount of children they had weren't registered with the government, but also the method in which the Nazis committed these atrocities. They didn't leave a lot of evidence in some cases, and that meant it was very difficult for historians to determine how many people were murdered. But most historians would agree it's roughly 6 million. And it occurred mainly during the Second World War between 1939 and 1945. Now, much of the killing took place in Austria and Poland. It didn't take place in Germany. Even though the Nazis were the masterminds behind the Holocaust, not much of the killing actually took place within their own borders. So after World War One, as we already alluded to, unemployment was a massive problem, and Hitler, he was no different from other Germans. When he came out of the military, he didn't have anywhere to go. So he actually signed up with the army to become a spy. And ironically enough, he was assigned to infiltrate the Nazis, which at the time was a very small political organization. He liked what he heard at their meetings, and he decided to stop being a spy and to join that political party. Now, throughout those meetings, Hitler started to formulate some ideas about why Germany was having the problems they were experiencing, and he blamed a lot of the issues on Jews who lived in Germany. Now, he said that Jews who worked in German government were actually the ones who surrendered during the First World War, so it's their fault that Germany lost. Jews weren't considered to be pure Aryan Germans, and the term Aryan just means that if you traced your lineage back, both of your grandparents would be fully German. There wouldn't be any Jewish blood within them. Many Jews worked in the finance industry. A lot of them made livings offering loans. Now, Hitler saw this as unethical because he decided that Jews should not, first of all, possess that much money that they can loan it out, but they shouldn't be giving loans at an interest rate where the Jews are going to be making enough money to survive off of. Jewish people tended to keep the money within their own community during the Great Depression. Now, this meant that the Jewish community in Germany was quite small. It was only about 500,000 kind of at that time. And during the Great Depression, if you were a Jewish family, well, you would go to a Jewish butcher to buy your meat, and you would go to a Jewish barber to get your haircut. And that kept the money within the Jewish community rather than spreading it out within the entire German economy. Jewish families were occupying land and jobs that could be better used by Aryan Germans. The uprisings. By 1923, Germany was in a complete state of chaos, and we can see an image here on the left. This is during the Spartacist uprising in 1920. And we can see we have loads of men who are armed in the streets of the city who are trying to take control over the government. Now, the government, they were unable to deal with the financial problems, and this led people to trying to create change, even if it meant acting violently. And Germans were inspired by events that were happening elsewhere in the world. In 1917, Russia actually had their own civil war and revolution. And when the Germans saw that this was successful in Russia, they decided to emulate that same sort of idea within their own country. Even though people were trying with these uprisings, none of them were successful in actually overthrowing the existing government. The Great Depression. In 1929, the American stock market crashed and the global economy fell into a depression. Before 1929, the USA had invested over 800 million gold marks. That was the currency that Germans were using at the time into the German economy. And the USA promptly took that back after the Depression happened. This meant 6 million Germans had lost their job. That's roughly 10% of the entire population within the country. In 1933, Hitler is going to become the Chancellor of Germany, and that's second in power only to the president. Now, by 1934, Hitler is going to take full power when President Paul von Hindenburg passes away, and Hitler becomes known as the Fuhrer, which means the undisputed leader. Now, if you remember a few slides ago, we talked about Hitler's views on Jewish people. Well, now he has the opportunity to put this plan into action. He's the sole leader of Germany. Most people in the country are on board with his ideas, and now Hitler has the ability to pass these laws without any opposition. In 1938, this is a time when the attack on Jews became a bit more violent. Hitler asked Germans to break into Jewish shops and homes to vandalize and destroy the property. However, Kristallnacht was not with the intention on killing Jewish people. It was solely to try to terrorize Jews to leave Germany on their own. Hitler knew if he were to create a program where he was arresting and imprisoning Jewish people, it would be a very difficult and expensive process. He was of the idea that if he could encourage Jewish people to leave Germany on their own, he won't have to worry about spending money to try to get rid of them. So this leads to concentration camps. And initially, Hitler did not condone the killing of Jews, but he simply wanted them to leave on their own accord. When this didn't solve the problem, he took to new measures, and in 1935 he opened up the first concentration camps. Concentration camps originally were for Jews, Gypsies, and people who politically opposed the Nazis, such as the communists. But between 1939 and 1941, concentration camps became used more as storage areas for large numbers of opponents of the Nazis before they were going to be killed. In 1939 and 1941, there was also a group called the Einsatzgruppen, and this was essentially a mobile killing squad where soldiers would travel from village to village, rounding up Jews and executing them, often in fields and burying them in shallow graves. Now, the Nazis not only realized this was a very expensive way to exterminate people, but members of the Einsatzgruppen suffered a lot of mental health problems from doing so. The job that they were assigned to do wasn't that of a normal soldier. When people join an army, they understand that they're going to go and fight other soldiers. They don't sign up to an army to go and hurt civilians. This led to the Nazis looking for a much more efficient, and here's the word we need to look at, systematic method of murdering large number of people in a very short period of time. Going to lead us to the final solution. This idea was come up with in 1941, and this was a plan where the Nazis were going to use large death camps with chambers in which can be filled with poisonous gases and large ovens to cremate bodies. So this might be a bit more of the information of the Holocaust that many of us are familiar with. A lot of students often ask how Jews were actually found, captured, and murdered because people could just claim that they weren't Jewish. The main way was by looking at family trees and birth records, and Hitler actually gave jobs to people specifically to track down Jewish people living in Germany and across Europe. German soldiers might often go into homes or businesses and arrest people who were suspected of being Jewish, and in that case, the burden of the proof lied on the individual. So if the German or the Nazis were accusing you of being Jewish, you had to prove that you were German. And that meant having your family tree tracing back to at least your grandparents to prove that they were not Jewish. But a far more common way of finding Jewish people were neighbors and friends actually turning on their other neighbors and friends. This meant that people were very willing to turn in their co-workers to the authorities in hopes of either throwing suspicion off themselves or looking favorable in the eyes of the Nazis. Now this leads us to the Holocaust Project. Facing History has been really impressed with the projects that our students have produced since 2017, and you can make anything that you want that shows what you have learned about the Holocaust. Now, this is going to take place over the next 5 weeks, so there's no need to do everything today, but start to have a think about something that you would like to do. Students who are really into art, they've made a collection of paintings or sketches. There was a student a few years ago who enjoyed sewing, and they made a authentic uniform that would be worn by a concentration camp inmate. Some people have made textbooks, little documentary films, PowerPoint presentations, comic books, you name it. It's been done before. So you'll have about 5 or 6 weeks to work on your project. For the time being, just have a think of an idea that you can work on, and please do email your teacher with any questions you have, but there will be more information presented to you in due course about the Holocaust Project.